Welcome to Third Eyesight. I'm your host, Juan Francisco, and I'm a spiritual intuitive who practices tarot card reading and mediumship. I've always been super curious about the supernatural and paranormal, and I'm here to share my stories and interview folks who want to share their own stories. Let's get to it. Hey everybody, so I know you've seen the title of this episode and you're like, oh boy, here we go, but I promise you it's going to be a gentle episode. At least I'm going to try and let it be gentle, because you know, based on my social media, that I can sometimes get passionate about these things. But I also want to be really fair, honest, and also very fair. And share my feelings about this topic, because it can get very confusing at times when working in the spiritual realm of things. And I had my own experience with an intuitive worker who crossed a line for me when it came to politics. So let's just go right into it. And I'm going to start by saying this. Politics runs life when you're living in a governed society. Period. Living off the grid in no man's land, it's a totally different thing. But for those of us that live in countries, and the likelihood that you live in a country governed by a system, the likelihood of that is higher if you're listening to this podcast, because you probably have an electronic device where you can hear it, you have access to Wi-Fi, or you're using public Wi-Fi provided by, I don't know, unless you're in Antarctica in the middle of nowhere and you have Wi-Fi provided, I don't know, you're hacking a satellite. But anyways, I digress. Most of us listening on this podcast probably are governed by a system to which we have to pay taxes, or to which we have to, or to which we decide to vote elected officials into. Now, some listeners may not be in a society where they can elect their officials. Regardless, they are living in a society that governs them. My heart goes out to people who do not have the ability to vote. Whether they're listening to this podcast or not, I don't know if you are, but I want to say that because there are people out there governed by a system that cannot vote their officials in. And so I used to think, well, I'm not really into politics. I had a phase of going through that. And then I realized, well, politics runs my life because I live in a country where I pay taxes and the laws affect me. They affect my rights. They affect my freedom of expression. So I really should care about politics. Now, I'm not an activist. I don't organize protests, and I wish I had the energy to do that. And I would like to join a protest sometime soon. I haven't gotten myself to do it. But I do vote. I vote more now than I used to when I first had the right to vote, especially locally. I try to participate in local elections now this time around. I have learned that politics is not something that I can escape. Now, bringing in spirituality, it gets very tricky when you are a spiritual worker, intuitive worker, and you bring politics into the mix. And I believe it's nuanced. And I think because of the last 6 years in the United States, in my experience, because of how the journey with government has gone in this country in the last 6 years, the feeling that politics affects livelihood and life and expression has become so much more, it has felt so much more real. And I have learned that, you know, as an intuitive worker, I want my Instagram to be as neutral as possible. That's what I've aimed for. I want to be as neutral as possible when it comes to politics. Now, obviously, that is not the case because I believe most of you probably know how progressive I am. Now, this is the thing. I am a gay man. I am a person of color with a lot of privilege, and yet still a person of color. I live in New York City, which is a liberal city. I grew up in Miami, which tends to be liberal, but it's within Florida, which is a pretty conservative state of the United States. And there have been times when someone has been elected into a role of immense leadership in my lifetime, as in yours, I assume. And what they stood for was against a lot of what I identify with, being LGBTQ plus, being a person of color. And so, how do you stay neutral with politics when someone involved in politics seems to want to threaten your sense of identity? For instance, right now in the state of Florida, there are laws put in place because of a recent bill signing by the governor. There are no discussions permitted in the kindergarten through third grade, I believe, through the elementary school classroom that have to do with same-sex relationships or gender identities that are outside of the male and female binary. And I started to think, well, what if a young boy is in class and says that his two dads took him to the park this weekend? When the teacher asks everyone, what did you do this weekend with your family? A teacher could be reported for allowing that kind of discussion if the teacher were to ask, well, where park did your dads take you to? Oh, they took me to so and so. And let's say another student goes home and says, hey mom, Timmy said that his two dads took him to the park, and then that mom gets upset and reports it to the school, and the teacher could get in trouble. That could happen in the state of Florida now. Now, all this to say, there's a point to all this. I'm going to bring you back to spirituality and spiritual work and being a psychic that is offering services. It's really hard for me to separate my spiritual work from my life as a human being. It's impossible. And I mean, I could be doing it, but I think let's say for this specific instance of the what they've been calling the Don't Say Gay bill in Florida. In this instance, I am so upset, and I feel like people's rights to be who they are being taken away from them. And listen, if you are listening and you are totally against homosexuality, which I don't believe you would because you're listening to me. I'm the gayest thing out there, one of them. But let's say you are anti-gay, but you're cool with me being psychic. Let's just say you're one of those, and that's totally fine, although I don't know how to feel about it. No one's saying that you have to like gay people. No one's saying that you got to become gay. You got to change, which is pretty impossible. But if you don't like the way someone's lifestyle is and it hurts nobody, let's say you think it hurts somebody. Well, if it hurts somebody, then it's hurting themselves. Worst case scenario. What is it to you? And therefore, why restrict that person's rights to marry who they want, to adopt a child, to let their children talk about their weekend at the park at school? There's no harm being done. It's been proven that there's no harm done to people when people are gay. So when something comes up where the rights of someone like myself are being restricted, I feel empowered to share that on social media with people who follow me because I'm psychic and because I do cute reels on Instagram. At least I like to think so. When it comes to spiritual work and being neutral on politics, here's my opinion. I don't think there's anything wrong with an intuitive worker expressing their political beliefs. I don't consider my passion for queer rights to be political, because the right for me to be myself openly in public as I'd like to, the right for me to marry someone of the same sex, for me that's a life desire. That's a right that I'm born with as a human being on this planet, and it doesn't hurt anybody else. So it's so hard for me to say it's political, Hopefully one day it won't be considered political, it'll just be considered common sense. But for now it's deemed political, and I apparently have a political agenda because I'm so openly gay, so I'm one of those. So what I mean to say is I can't separate who I am as a human being from my spiritual work. And the thing is, there are many companies out there, corporate companies, that make their political leanings known, and people shop at those companies. And if you don't like it, don't shop at Chick-fil-A. I hate to name drop, but like I personally don't get chicken sandwiches. I don't buy food from Chick-fil-A anymore because they have a history of being anti queer. But if you shop at Chick-fil-A, I don't judge you because their food is good. I'll admit it, it's good. But I don't want to give my dollar to a company that has a history of wanting to shut out the voices of queer people. And at the same time, the clothes that I shop for, they're made in other countries. The phone that I have was made in another country, and I don't know the working conditions of the people who worked on my clothes, who worked on my phone. And I feel terrible about that. And that's why I don't have any right to judge other people for where they put their dollar. And that's the freedom that we have. We can shop with our dollar wherever we want to, and we can refuse to shop wherever we don't want to shop. And so when it comes to psychic work, I see it the same way. If there's an intuitive worker out there that I really admire and they say something that really goes against my values, I have the right to no longer consume their content. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think this expectation that all psychics have to be neutral about their political beliefs or neutral about what they're passionate about in terms of activism, I think that that has been the status quo. And I think the more social media becomes, well, it is a norm, but the more it becomes a norm in our culture, in our global culture, the more hopefully transparency of passions there will be. Because on Twitter, you can see the things I like. You can see what other people like. And I've been on Twitter, and I would follow people, and then I would see they would like a post or a tweet by somebody that I thought was an unhealthy personality. And I'm like, oh, that person liked their tweet. What does that say about them? And that's for me to determine, well, if they're following someone that goes so against my values, then I make a decision about whether I want to keep following the person that liked the tweet. What a rabbit hole. But I think you understand what I mean. I believe with social media, social media has really empowered us to raise our voices even more, to have individual platforms to share our thoughts. And I think when it comes to my feelings on human rights or on the right to live as I'd like to, as for other people to live as they'd like to, it's just, to me, it's a non-negotiable. That's what comes with me. Now, I'm going to share a story in which I disagreed with somebody who was an intuitive worker, and I was consuming their content, and I was talking to them on a pretty regular basis, once in a while. This person has a social media presence, and they used to do Instagram lives. I don't know if they still do. I think they still do. And I would join the lives, and I loved them, and we built this little community. And I'm sure that a couple people listening will know who this is. And I've already had enough trouble with this individual. And if you share this podcast episode, that's your freedom. I have the freedom to express this. I'm not naming this person because it would not be fair to them. And I'm not here to make a point against this person. I'm here to make a point about the story itself and about politics and infusing politics with spiritual work. And just so I can be honest about how I've consumed content and the decisions that I've made about other intuitive workers. And now this also was before I learned that I could be an intuitive worker. I was literally just someone who wanted to be read and wanted to receive messages. Now I'm a little bit of both. So back to this person, extremely gifted person, the real deal. And over time, they expressed some ideas in regards to their political leanings that to me I didn't agree with them, but I was totally fine with that. It wasn't until one time they went on they started talking about the COVID-19 vaccine and telling people why they shouldn't get it, and saying that the same metal that Elon Musk uses in his cars are also found in the vaccine. So who's to say the government isn't tracking us through the vaccines, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I've said this before. I'm fully vaccinated and boosted, and I hope to get a fourth shot because that's my desire. I have nothing against people who don't want to get vaccinated as long as they take other precautions to keep themselves, their community, and their family safe. I personally prefer to follow science. Science is science is science. I don't know what else to say about it. And that's an instance where, to me, that's not a political statement. Science is just science. And we've been through pandemics before. We've been through plagues as a globe before. We we've been through this stuff before, and we've always wanted solutions to these things. And here was a solution that, although it was quick, I figured, well, either I'll die from COVID, I will stay inside the rest of my life, I'll wear a mask outside the rest of my life, or I'll get this vaccine and live, or get this vaccine and die from it. What's my choice? I'd rather get the vaccine and take the chance. And I'm still here a year and a half later. Knock on wood, no side effects. I'm fine. I can still sing, I can still run, I can still do exercise and work out at the gym, I can still run a podcast. So, anyways, this person made it a point to say that we should not be getting the vaccine. And I started to feel really uncomfortable because now I do believe there are medical mediums out there, but I also believe that when it comes to intuitive work and medicine, unless you are very experienced in providing health diagnoses through intuition, we should not be giving health diagnoses to our clients or to people who consume our content because it gets so tricky. I was thinking recently, I did not go to medical school, but I have intuition. I have intuition, but I know nothing about rock climbing, so I'm not going to tell you how to rock climb. I have intuition, but I'm not going to tell you how to run a hot air balloon. It would be ridiculous. And I don't have that type of experience for spirit on the other side to then use as a frame of reference to provide signs and symbols or directions on how to run a hot air balloon. So why would I do the same thing but with your health? With diagnosing things in your bones or in your brain or in your heart, in your lungs? Because I don't know the intricacies of that. I could tell you generically, I feel pain in my chest. I could say things like that. But for me to get as detailed as saying, you have fill in the blank illness, or go check on this because you might have this illness. I am not experienced in health enough to share that in readings, and I won't ever will be. That's a subject I do not want to touch in my readings. I can read an anatomy book tomorrow, and I still will not want to give a diagnosis to anybody. I may want to, after reading an anatomy book, it may help me be a little more specific on I feel pain in my stomach, or I feel pain in my appendix. I might say those things, but I won't ever say I feel a pain in my appendix, therefore you have appendicitis, and it's toxic. No, because what if I'm wrong? I don't know anything about appendicitis. I don't know anything about it that much to say that. You get my drift. So this person, the psychic, said what they said about vaccines, and before they made that comment, I was already feeling a little bit uncomfortable with what they were putting out on social media about this was a year after the racial reckoning in the United States, and in the midst of talks about police brutality. And this person was very much pro-police. And there's nothing wrong being pro-police. I'm not anti-police personally. It's just it was being pro-police and trying to, it was Blue Lives Matter. And that was a phrase in response to Black Lives Matter. And when I see phrases like Blue Lives Matter, what I understand is, well, the point of Black Lives Matter is not coming across to people who say Blue Lives Matter or All Lives Matter. And listen, if you want to have a discussion with me, I know people might be upset for me to say that upon hearing me say that. If you want to discuss it with me, I'm going to say it right now. I am not going to answer DMs or emails about it because it will be extremely exhausting. The Google is there for a reason. You can Google the history of the civil rights movement and the history of slavery in America and the history of redlining districts and, redlining by insurance companies rather, and the history of segregated neighborhoods and schools. But for now, I'll say that this person just was very quick to adhere to the Blue Lives Matter mentality, be anti-vaccine. And I decided, you know what, this person is, in my opinion, misinforming her audience. And the community I was a part of, the majority of them tended to agree with her in terms of the health thing, the vaccine and COVID. And I made the personal decision to just like quietly, I unfollowed them. That's it. I unfollowed them. That's it. I didn't block them. I just unfollowed them. And they never knew why I did that. I'll be very honest. I'm going to be a little catty right now, but sometimes the people that follow them look at my Instagram stories and my content and they don't think I'm looking. Maybe they don't care, but I don't know. So if you're listening and you're one of those people, you can share this if you want to. It's not going to, I'm still here. I'm going to be fine. Anyways, they never knew why I unfollowed them. And that person got very upset with it. They got upset with the fact that I unfollowed them. And instead of asking me, they publicized it without naming me, thankfully. But even if they did, who cares? That was an instance when I decided, okay, this person's politics, I don't know if I can call it politics because it's like, it was just very anti-science and not willing to be open-minded about conversations about race and police brutality. I don't know what to call it, but I'll call it politics. Their values in terms of their politics didn't align with mine, and I found it very troubling, so I unfollowed them. And if you, the listener, disagree with me about doing that, disagree with my thoughts on those topics regarding to politics, that person's feelings about politics, that's your right. And I'm not saying for you to listen to my podcast, for you to get a reading with me, you have to agree with me politically. That doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is, you get to decide as a listener whether you want to listen to this podcast. You get to decide whether you want to book a reading with me. And I think what gets us really upset and want to address somebody when we're upset with them is because we feel disappointed they didn't live up to the expectation we had of them. The expectation being that, oh, they must agree with everything that I believe in because they're helping me out with my life through readings, or they're helping me out with this choice I have to make through this reading right now. And they're such a good person, so they must be on the right page as me in terms of everything else in life. It's not the case, and we learn that again and again in life. We meet people all the time who are lovely people and may have very different beliefs than we do. And if it's a deal breaker for you, that's your choice to not associate with those people. And I know I sound really cold, but no one's forcing you to follow me on Instagram or listen to my podcast or book a reading with me. And, I'm not trying to be high and mighty here, but the way I just simply unfollow that person is the way I wish most people would unfollow people. Now, that person was upset because I had a rapport with them. They were very helpful to me when I asked them questions about things in DMs. When I had a very frustrating, intense night, I asked them to send me some healing, please, and they did it for me. And I'm forever grateful for that, forever grateful. And yet, again, this is going to sound cold, but I didn't owe them anything but my gratitude. And I feel cold saying that. And so when I unfollowed them, and they didn't know why, they took it as, I did all of this for you, and this is how you treat me, this is what you do to me. And I thought, well, I asked you for healing, but you could have easily told me something like, book a reading with me to get healing, or book a session with me to get healing. You're not obligated to, and you did have the kindness of your heart, and I was grateful for it, but I don't owe you my loyalty for that. And I say the same for you. If you have one reading with me, you the listener, if you ever do, it doesn't mean I'm the only person you have to come back to. There's so many other psychics. And I know that's horrible for my marketability, but I'm not going to BS you. That's the truth. Why am I better than the next psychic? Why am I the only thing you should be coming to? Why should your political beliefs align with mine? Why should mine align with yours? The choice is always yours. And when it comes to spirituality, our spirituality is a lot of what drives our politics. Our spirituality is a lot of what drives our values in this world. And if you're not a spiritual person, if you're an atheist or agnostic, or you don't really dabble in spiritual practices, you still, whether you believe it or not, you do have a soul. You have an essence of you, and that essence of you drives your political beliefs, your feelings at the voting ballot, your feelings when you watch the news, your feelings when you hear a speech by a politician. So it's pretty inseparable. So the way I see it is everyone has the freedom and the right to post what they want to in terms of politics, what they're passionate about in their community, telling people to vote. To me, there's nothing wrong with that because we're human living these conditions. And I see it as a form of support for my community. And I consider it, a duty I like to take on to tell people, remind people to vote in New York State and New York City for those who follow me and live in New York City and New York State. And if someone doesn't like that, if they think, oh, Juan posts too much content about local politics and they don't say gay bill and reproductive rights or Black Lives Matter, if someone doesn't like that, they have the freedom to unfollow me. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm going to say it now. So it's in the ether forever, ever, and ever in the podcast ether. There's nothing wrong with unfollowing me because you disagree with my style of readings, how I express myself in content on my Instagram or social media, or you disagree with or what I believe and the things I'm passionate about. It's okay to unfollow me. There is such a fear these days or such an anger around unfollowing people because they disappointed us. And we really have to remember, and I know some of you, you're not going to like this, some of you are not going to like this. Nobody owes us anything. Nobody owes us anything. If they do us wrong, the least they could owe us is an explanation, but even then we don't always get that. But in terms of following on social media, no one owes us anything. And this is the thing, social media has become such we have made it such a macro or a microcosm or a reflection of our real life relationships. And the fact of the matter is, in social media, we build community. But friendships are built through intimate conversation. So if I lose a follower tomorrow because they didn't like the fact that I posted about gay marriage, that's fine. If one of my very closest family members unfollowed me, then I would have a conversation with them about it offline because that doesn't belong on my social media platform. Me pointing out, hey, and no, there's no uncle, just saying, just an example, there's no uncle out there who's doing this. My uncle unfollowed me because I posted something about gay marriage and I can't believe, no. There's no reason for me to do that. No reason at all. Because you, the public, have nothing to do with it. Nothing at all to do with it. And if one of you were to unfollow me, like I said, I owe you nothing, you owe me nothing. I'm just expressing myself on social media, and if it jives with you, great. And if you want to book a reading, great. If it doesn't jive with you, that's fine. If you don't want to book a reading because of it, that's also fine. There are other psychics out there who have political leanings like yours, and you can book a reading with. And sometimes you'll find them, and they're not great at doing readings. Sometimes someone is great at readings, they have very different personal beliefs than you do. I've come across that a lot, and I respect that. Nothing wrong with it. And it's a case-by-case basis. So I've gone on into a rabbit hole. But I feel like it still is a little bit, this is changing, but it still is a little bit taboo to express your political beliefs as an intuitive worker. I'll say for me personally, as long as it has to do with my personal rights or the personal rights of people who just want to live their life authentically and keep themselves safe and their families safe, I will keep posting about it. And it's just, especially in the time we're living in, it's so hard. It's so hard to not care about the political news because it's affecting us in the United States. It's affecting us so much, and some of us feel very concerned about things in the political news. And it's our prerogative to express that concern. And also, I'm just going to end with, I don't know how people are going to receive this episode. Some might not be pleased with it, but I'm okay with feeling like there's no like I don't know how to conclude this episode, and I feel like I need to be okay with that because there's no easy conclusion or conclusion to come to about this. It's really just about we all have the freedom to consume what we want to. We all have the freedom to distance ourselves from something that makes us feel uncomfortable. That's okay. That's part of being human. And I'm a little concerned that it seems like the more connected we are on social media, the more nervous we are to live our truth sometimes. Isn't that interesting? It's like doing the opposite effect sometimes. I don't know. I don't know. I think people feel nervous about being called out on things, or people want to call people out on things on the internet in public. While sometimes that could be justified in some respects, I guess, in some circumstances, it really, I don't know, it just, in some instances, it's just, there's no reason to because we don't owe each other anything. Now, I want to say there's a big difference between what I'm saying and someone facing a consequence for something they did to harm somebody else. That's a very different matter. But when someone's just expressing their personal beliefs, we have the choice to continue to consume their content or not. Just like for me, this is besides politics, but I sometimes come across intuitive workers who sell a lot of spells like how to get your lover back, how to get your ex back. And I choose not to follow those accounts because I personally, my spiritual values don't align with prayers like that, spells like that. Because I believe in the willpower of each individual spirit and person, and to try and cast a spell or encourage prayer to bring back your lover and your ex, your ex-boyfriend, ex-girlfriend, that disregards the willpower of that other person you're casting a spell on or you're praying about. And because of that, I don't follow accounts that promote that. And that's my right. Doesn't mean they have to stop existing. Doesn't mean they have to, that they're evil people. A lot of them are really good people doing that work. Just doesn't align with me. And not everyone's going to be my cup of tea, and I'm not going to be everyone's cup of tea. Politically, spiritually, in terms of practice, in terms of, in terms of how I look, in terms of what things I wear, there's always going to be some reason someone's going to find for someone not fitting into their group. And sometimes it's a little over the top and unfair, and sometimes it's just a matter of difference of opinion, difference of lifestyle, and that's okay. But I'm not going to restrict them from expressing themselves. As long as it's not doing actual harm to people in any way, that's their right to do that. And maybe there's more to discuss there, because then what is harm? Is telling people they can pray for their ex to come back, is that doing harm to that person who is booking that spell? Oh, that is a topic for another day. But I think you get the gist of what I mean. Everyone's style is different. Everyone's personal beliefs are different. And that's something that we can learn to accept. Maybe not be comfortable with, but at least accept. Because that's what makes life interesting, right? Well, thanks for going down this rabbit hole with me. I've been thinking about this episode topic for quite a while, and especially now I feel like it's so timely. And if you have any questions about readings on my website, or if you have any suggestions for future topics for this podcast, if you want to be on this podcast, if you want to submit a voice note or a letter to talk about your personal story of intuition or a ghost story or supernatural experience, please DM or email me. You can go to thirdeyesight.media/contact and email me that way. I would love to have you on. I would love to have your voice on or have your letter be read on an episode. Thank you so much for listening. Have a beautiful rest of your day.